Welcome to Motherhood. Whether you're 18 or 80, Dr. Christina Hibbert, clinical psychologist, author, and mother of 6, is here to help you through the ups and downs, the joys and frustrations, the new information from experts, and the stories of happiness and heartbreak from real moms. Remember, if you can, tell your mama to listen too.
And I'll make everything all right.
Here's Christy.
Welcome to Motherhood. It's Dr. Christina Hibbert here to help you overcome, to become, and to flourish through this remarkable experience we call motherhood. There are so many different experiences we have in motherhood, and we talk about all those here each week. We talk about parenting, we talk about raising kids, we talk about the stresses of motherhood, the beauty of motherhood, the joys of motherhood. And today we're going to be talking about something that I find pretty much affects almost every woman in some way or shape nowadays. And if it hasn't affected you or impacted your life in some way yet, it probably will with somebody you love at some point. And that is breast cancer. We're going to talk today about breast cancer. We're going to talk today about some of the genetic testing that goes on with breast cancer so that we can, have some choices for ourselves and what we want to do. We're going to talk with an expert today, an expert not because she wanted to learn about this, but because she's been through this herself, and we'll be introducing her in just a moment and talking more about that. But before we get into that, I just want to thank you all for joining us here to grow through motherhood with us instead of just going through it. Because as we say, it's a lot better to grow through it and to do it together here each week on Motherhood Radio. And if you haven't already, I hope you will find us online on social media. I haven't been the best about posting all the time, but I really want us to work on our Facebook group, Growing Through Motherhood, to connect there more and to share and support each other better there. And so join us there on Facebook, Growing Through Motherhood. That's also the first place I always post all the new episodes, so it's the easy place to just kind of know what's going on with Motherhood Radio as well. You can find us on Instagram, Dr. Christina Hibbert, and you can go to my website, drchristinahibbert.com, for resources on all the things we talk about each week on the show. Now, it's not October. Usually we're talking about breast cancer awareness in October because that's Breast Cancer Awareness Month. But I didn't want to wait because I know this is such an important topic and it's touched me personally. We've had a lot of breast cancer in our family. My mom is a 3-time breast cancer survivor, and my aunt on my dad's side is a breast cancer survivor, and my mother's great aunt died of breast cancer. And so we have breast cancer on both sides of my family. My mother was first diagnosed when I was 15 and she was 37. And so I have been getting my mammogram since I was 27 years old because they recommend at least 10 years before when your relative was diagnosed. And, this is serious. I remember my mom coming home and being really upset. We have 6 kids in our family as well, and I was the oldest. And I remember thinking, my mom's going to die, and I'm going to be in charge of all these kids, and I'm not going to be able to go to college. And, I was completely terrified of this experience, and I had no idea what it really meant or, the success rates or the survival rates. And now here we are. All these years later, my mom's been through breast cancer on both sides of her breasts, and finally in the last experience, she did a double mastectomy. So as she says, I might die of something, but I'm not going to die of breast cancer. So, and we've done the genetic testing. And as I was telling our guest, my mom did that, and it was inconclusive in her case because she's had 3 different types of breast cancer, and a couple of them were like really rare forms. And so they couldn't say for sure if there was a genetic risk or not. So I haven't pursued it any further, but I'm really interested to talk to our guest today because this is such an important issue. And as you know, I'm sure all of you listening out there, many of you can say, yeah, my sister or my mother or my aunt or my friend has been through this. So I hope today will give us some education on what we can do, we can empower ourselves as women and especially as mothers. How do we then help our children to battle this, this illness that affects so many women in our lives? So without further ado, let me go ahead and bring in our guest here. So we've got Kim Casil. Welcome to Motherhood, Kim.
Hi, thank you for having me.
It's so great to talk with you, and I'm so glad to get to meet you.
Thank you, me too.
On Skype at least.
Yes.
It counts. It counts.
It counts.
That's right. So Kim and I became connected through 30seconds.com, which we both do tips for. And it's a wonderful place. I always talk about it. And if you haven't yet checked it out, definitely go to 30seconds.com. You can find Kim there. Her last name is spelled Kusiciel.
Yes.
Pronounced Casil,
You got it.
but that's how it's spelled. So you can find her there. You can also find her on social media. It's at Kim Kusiciel on Twitter, on Instagram. She's known by her website name, which is nohappyaccidents.com. I love that title. It's so great.
Thanks.
And you definitely need to check out her blog and her website. She's talked about her experience with living with the breast cancer gene mutation and all the decisions that's gone on with that and all the things that she's decided to do in her life. And that's what she's here to talk to us about today. Kim is also a mom of 3. How old are your kids?
My oldest is 11, and then I have a newly minted 10-year-old son, and my youngest daughter is almost 7.
Wow. Busy,
Yeah.
busy.
Yeah.
So great. So again, she gets it, everybody. Like I always say, she's in the thick of it with all of us. Kim is also a former elementary education teacher. She's turned to a stay-at-home mom. She's a part-time early childhood education teacher, small business brand and social media strategist, a health enthusiast, and a breast cancer advocate. And like I said, you can find her on nohappyaccidents.com, where she does write about, the joys and the messiness of life and motherhood and all the things that she's been through herself. So definitely check that out. You can also find her on Facebook. Her Facebook page is No Happy Accidents, and Instagram as well. nohappyaccidents_Kim, right?
Right.
Like that about cover it all?
You got it.
Okay, perfect. Well, let's just jump right in then. So let's just start by telling us, a little bit how you became an advocate for breast cancer. It's your personal story a little bit, and let's just start with that.
Sure.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
I've always been interested in women's health, but in high school, we had a special guest come in and talk about breast cancer and how as young women, we really needed to be advocates for ourselves and do self-checks. And it was a really uncomfortable class to participate in, but it was all of us girls. And it came at a really good time because about 3 weeks later, we got the news that my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. And it kind of helped me not be so scared of what was to come because I felt like I got a really good precursor set of information. And I became an advocate for her at that point and really spoke for her at doctor's appointments and asked questions because she was really having a hard time with everything involved with it. She's a mom of 4, and I was the oldest, and my youngest sibling was only in first grade.
Oh.
There was quite a spread and of responsibilities to do at home. And my dad, he's a business owner, and he was able to take time off and go to doctor's appointments and kind of figure out what to do because her case was pretty significant and the survival rates were not high for what she ended up overcoming. So she ended up having or getting the opportunity to participate in some research studies that really helped her get through that. But through that process, I learned so much and really was with her through most of it until she basically forced me to go off to college. I didn't want to go because I wanted to stay home and help take care of her and my siblings. I just felt a real responsibility for them. And I'll never forget, leaving them notes around the house, how to take care of the laundry and different chores to do so they could take the load off for her because she's such a giving mother and still did all that and still came to the soccer games and still went to all the events while losing her hair and feeling like garbage and going through chemo. So it was hard for me to leave her, but she really wanted me to have the experience and to grow up. So while I was away, I did my own learning and just kind of always kept it in my thoughts and researched stuff on my own. I didn't take classes in it. I didn't go into the sciences. I just kind of did my own learning. And thankfully so, because about 5 years later, she was diagnosed again on the other breast. And she had only chosen lumpectomies at this point. And I was there with her at the appointment when they found it. So to be able to be there with her and to help her grow, and for me to learn so much, it gave me a really good foundation for where I'm at, because we did eventually find out that she herself was a carrier and is a carrier for the BRCA gene mutation. And if you don't know, it stands for BR for breast and CA for cancer, breast cancer susceptible genes. So that's where the BRCA comes from.
Okay.
And everybody has them. Men and women all have BRCA genes. The difference is if you have the mutation on the DNA strand, then you are susceptible to getting breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and a whole slew of other cancers that aren't discussed usually. And I think something that's surprising for your audience to know is it's not just women who have to worry about it, but our men do as well. And there are many men diagnosed with breast cancer and going through mastectomies as well, which is not as commonly talked about. So I just wanted to put that out there, because that's something else that we need to think about, because it can be passed through the mother or the father.
Wow, that was so interesting. So I want to back up for a second before we go into talking about the BRCA gene mutation. So it sounds like our stories are so similar in a lot of ways, but the beautiful thing is that your mother, first of all, you were sort of prepared, like you said, like you'd had that little course in school, which was, it's a great plug for education, right? And really that we can do that with our own children. If we're not, we can't expect the schools to be able to give them the education they need, but we can talk to them about it from a younger age than we might think, so that they can be prepared down the road for even if anything happened to somebody else, even if it's not to them. And then you were able to be involved in your mother's treatment and really to be there. I felt like I was totally outside of everything. Like I didn't even know what was going on. And I think that was really hard for me, even though I was only 15. I wasn't 18, which is a little bit of a difference, but still, I feel like it's probably really helped you to be able to be involved and know what was happening and have that openness and honesty with your mother while she was going through it, which is another lesson for us listening in. That we can, if this is going on in our families, we can help try to have that openness with our families and talk about it, because I think it removes a lot of the fear. Like you said, you could have the knowledge or have the understanding or kind of see what's happening and not just see my mom's sick or, my friend is sick or whatever, but I don't really know what that means, especially for a child. To understand, right? So I think that's great. And that's just a couple points I wanted to throw out there first. And now, so because of all this that your mom went through, you went and did the testing.
Yes.
Or did your mom do it first?
My mom did it first, and hers came back positive, and she didn't want to share that with anybody. And it was advised at the time to tell your immediate family members. They gave you a form letter notifying them so you could then decide what to do on your own with your own doctors. Okay. And she didn't really want to share that with anyone except for me. And then about a year later, I had just had my second child, so my son, and I went and did the testing because it was so hot on my mind and I just needed to know. Yeah. And so at the time I was 28 years old. I had 2 kids. My husband and I had grand plans for a big family. And, so we went to the appointment, and sure enough, a few months later came back positive. Wow. And met with a geneticist and kind of talked about some plans and some things they thought I should do. But I had to really let that marinate in me and in my heart and soul of what the choice would be for our family. And to have a good partner in my husband through that was really quite a blessing. And the support of my mom and dad, because they had been there.
Right. And what a blessing for that. Yeah, absolutely. So let's just break this down for everybody out there listening who haven't been through this. Maybe they haven't had a mother or a family member with breast cancer yet. So it's usually recommended that if somebody in your family has been through breast cancer, that person gets tested to see if then other family members would want to get tested if they carry that gene. Is that how it works?
So you actually can go to your doctor
Okay.
and they'll refer you to a geneticist or a specialist in this field because they do have a separate set of expertise to bring to the table.
Okay.
And then what they do is they sit down and they talk to you about your whole family line. So like think of you, but then your grandparents and then their parents, so you have to go all the way up and they want to know tons of information. I found out things about family from, a few generations back I would never have known about how they died or illnesses they had. And that built basically a picture that our family on both sides had suffered many cancers. And they put all that into like a algorithm, I'll call it. It's, they have a database. And that gives them a little bit of feedback of how realistic is it for you to have the gene or not. And if they say that you qualify, basically, I'm kind of bringing this down to really easy
That's
terms.
good. That's what we need. We need basic here.
So if you qualify or if they think your risks are high enough, then they'll suggest you get the test done. And all it is it's a spit test, or they do a blood test too. So that it's really easy. And when I did it, it was many years ago. It was almost 10 years ago. And the science, has evolved in how they take all that. But two other risk factors to keep in mind is it's not just family history. It could be if you yourself were diagnosed prior to the age of 50 or if you have had multiple breast cancers. So those are two other things to keep in mind if you're interested or considering the need for the test.
Okay. That's so interesting because I've always wondered, my mom did that and it was inconclusive. So then I'm like, well, what does that mean for me? And should I go talk to somebody and see because they said they wouldn't recommend us to get tested then because it was inconclusive, but that didn't mean she wasn't a carrier. You know what I mean? So I feel kind of like, maybe I should talk to somebody and just see what they recommend for me.
Right.
So
yeah, you could do that.
Yeah.
And then they'll at least be able to point you in the right direction or say you're okay.
Yeah. So thank you for breaking that down for us in simple terms.
Sure.
So here you are 10 years ago and you find out that you have this, the BRCA mutation gene as well, gene mutation as well. Okay. So how did you proceed then? What do you do next? What do you do with that?
So the doctors recommend some pretty extreme measures, in my opinion. At the time, they said, you should be done with your family and you should have your breast removed through a mastectomy and your ovaries removed. Wow. And I basically was like, whoa, hold the brakes. I'm a 28-year-old mom. Wow. I'm not in a position to do this at this time. I need more time to figure this out. And then they told me, well, then, if you're not sure you're done growing your family, there's tests we can do on your unborn baby to make sure that they don't carry this gene mutation, and you can, decide what to do with that. Basically, ending that pregnancy so we could stop the gene. And my husband and I looked at each other and we said, we don't play God, and science will change and evolve, and we're not going to do that. But thank you for letting me know. And we walked out. It was just not a conversation I was willing to have. But that kind of forced us to make some quick decisions about the timeline. So at the time, and I think it's still fairly recommended in this order, that if you're going to have preventative surgeries like a mastectomy or an oophorectomy, which is the removal of the ovaries, then they say to wait about 5 years or 2 years after you're done breastfeeding. So either about, 3 to 4 years out after having a baby. And it's also for carrying young children. So because when you have a mastectomy, the muscles are impacted, and they want you not to have a child that's at a carrying age so that you're damaging what you need to heal.
Right.
So we had to think about that in that term. So I had just had a baby, and we're like, okay, so 5 years from now puts me at, 33. But we want to have more kids. So, we're like, okay, so now we have to pre-think when we want to have that baby, to think about when we want to have this surgery, and all that. So
It's a lot
I'll
to
just
decide
start there.
all up front.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're having to like speed up your whole family planning process and all of that. I mean, that's a lot to figure out all at once. Now, let me ask you this. When you are test positive for the gene mutation, what did they give you? I mean, you said they recommend these things, like you said, that are pretty extreme, which of course I think many people would do if they really felt like they were going to be at that high risk. So are they giving you, like, what are they saying as far as your risk then of developing some form of cancer? Like, how high is that risk? And does
Yeah.
that impact your decision on what kind of, measures you're going to take?
It does. So at the time, they told me that my risk factor was that by the time I turned 75, I had an 86% chance of developing breast cancer.
Wow.
And I'm going to forget the percentage, but in the high 40s for ovarian cancer.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So pretty significant when you think of an average woman's rate is, 6 to 8%. So the interesting thing is that you can get your ovaries removed and keep your breasts, and that reduces your risks by half immediately.
Oh, both of them.
Yeah.
Oh.
So if you get your ovaries out but keep your breasts, then that reduces that risk. It would have brought me down to like 43%, of risk of breast cancer. But I just didn't feel like getting my ovaries out was the right choice, at that time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So
But
you
some
guys,
women do that.
right. Okay. So there are these options. And like you said, some of them are pretty extreme and some of them, there's a lot to figure out. So you are trying to figure all this out. You guys decided
Right.
to go ahead and go for another baby.
Right.
And so you had a third.
So, well, we had a little bit of a journey to get there, but
Okay.
so I found out I was a carrier for the gene. I was still teaching full time in my elementary school and had two little ones at home. And making these big decisions while teaching was really difficult because I gave so much to my classroom and my students, and I didn't want to sacrifice what they were experiencing while I was trying to make these big life choices. And it was a little bit too much. So I had a little bit of a breakdown driving to school one day and decided that, I needed to take a step back and kind of focus on me. And that was a huge thing for me. I'd never done that in my life. And I'll never forget, there was a Carrie Underwood song playing in the car. And the song, Jesus, Take the Wheel.
Oh, that's a
And
good one.
I just lost it on the highway heading into work. And that was the moment that I didn't want to leave my job. I still love my job. I want to get back there.
And
but
we love
I
teachers that
knew-
love their job.
Yeah.
We love teachers.
But I knew that to be a good teacher,
Yeah.
I needed to do this. So I did take a leave of absence. And then in that first summer away, we were lucky. We got pregnant right away, but we unfortunately had a miscarriage at 12 weeks.
Oh, gosh.
And what's interesting is that my grandmother was diagnosed with ovarian cancer that same time.
Oh,
And I just felt like, and she just passed away this last month, but I feel like that grandmother was given this extension because of this loss of mine. As funny as that sounds,
Oh, no.
I felt like it was a God moment. And we were blessed to then be pregnant again 6 months later with our daughter, Danielle.
Wow.
So it's just a little bit of a longer story, but it was interesting to point out the losses and the loves and all the good and the bad that kind of balance out in time.
Well, and that's reality, that's how it is. And it's not easy for many to conceive, and miscarriages are so common and so overlooked. But I'm very sorry for the loss of that child, and what a beautiful experience thinking of how that might have helped your grandmother in some way. And yeah, I love that. And so, so I didn't want to gloss over that at all, but I know that's important. And so you had this third baby, and then you were supposed to wait 5 years after you had the baby, or 5 years total? Okay.
They say about 5 years after,
Okay.
just to get past that, like, carrying young child stage. And at the same time, though, they also say the 10 years. So 10 years prior to when your parent had the same breast cancer or ovarian cancer, whatever the cancers you're trying to make sure you don't have, you should have the screenings done. So I had actually started the screenings much earlier, right after I found out I had the gene. So I've been having mammograms and ultrasounds and different things since my late 20s. But then, you know, I kind of, in that time frame, even though I wasn't doing anything as far as surgeons and things go, in that time frame I was learning, I was researching, I was finding about other people's stories, going online, participating in online communities to really learn about it and help me make some choices. So that kind of was in the meantime.
So I want to point that out because for our listeners, everybody out there listening, I mean, this is good advice right here that I don't want to gloss over either, that, you know, when you're considering these types of decisions, even if you're considering, you know, should I go and get tested or, you know, just learning more about breast cancer awareness in general. I love that you pointed that out yourself. That you said, I'm not, you know, I didn't go into this line of work. I'm not an expert in that way, but you have become an expert because you have learned so much and you've obviously lived through it as well, which I think is the most important experience that we all have when we become experts. But for everybody listening, you know, that's a great piece of advice. You can go and just learn and become involved with communities and, like you say, connecting with other people who've been through it. Like, that's why I really appreciate you being here, sharing your story and your experience, because it helps us to see what it's really like and then to maybe hopefully help some of our listeners who are maybe going through this or maybe considering this to make their own decisions. So yes. Okay. So here we are, you're making your decisions, you're getting ready. And when was it that you finally decided what you were going to do and how did you make that decision?
Yeah. So I sat on that choice for a really long time because after our third was born, I personally still wanted another. My husband was kind of on the fence. But then I had a moment where I thought, what if I did not make it through this? If I just ignore it and live naively, which is part of me wanted to do, because it was such big choices to make. But I felt like if I had another child and then something happened to me, I would be leaving behind 4 kids with a husband. And it was that moment that I was like, what's the most important thing here, for me to have another child or to love more children in my lifetime because of my line of work through that way? And that really helped me to, you know, kind of find peace with ending that stage of our, you know, as women, ending that stage of motherhood.
That's a hard decision. Yeah. That's huge.
But that was really what took us the longest to get to that point. So once I kind of determined that, I started getting more serious. So I met with different plastic surgeons and I, you know, researched different people to go to. And my own, you know, gynecologist helped me make some choices related to who I should see. And so I went and I had to get breast mammograms and breast MRIs. And for my case, they alternated every 6 months. So I'd have a mammogram and 6 months later have an MRI, then 6 months later have a mammogram. And so they're pretty intense protocols. And then for the ovarian cancer screenings, you know, they had to do ovarian ultrasound. So that's how they screen for that, at least for my case. And so I had a mammogram and an MRI. And the MRI in 2016 showed a 4-centimeter spot. So they had me come back, and the 3 weeks it took to come back to get another one was enough to really jolt me to my senses and say, I probably need to do something more serious about this.
So at this point, they were just screening, like doing intense kind of screening, like we would do mammograms, but you're doing the more intense with MRI and everything. So that was just recommended because of your genetic testing results. Yes. Okay. And so, but finding something, it is scary. I had one moment where I found some lumps and I was like, holy cow. And everybody freaked out because of my history and they just rushed me in and Oh my goodness. It was so scary. And it was fine. I have fibrocystic breasts, which means, lumpy
Yep.
boobs basically for everybody. But it is scary. So it does make you
Right.
go, okay, what should I do now? So it makes you sit up and listen, right? So
Yeah.
so what did you do next?
It was my list that made me
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I finally got into my plastic surgeon's office and said, okay, I need to know what are my options. And I had been researching and collecting different options for a really long time. So I felt really knowledgeable in what I thought I wanted to do when I walked into that office. But they do a really great job of explaining all the choices from their point of view. And so they gave us a lot of new information and things I hadn't thought about. And, they don't make a recommendation for you. That's not their job. They just want to present all the info. And then we have to kind of wrestle with what's the right choice.
Yeah.
So we then went from that appointment, and my husband and I went home and we kind of talked about it off and on for a little while, and then finally went back in for a follow-up and decided what we were going to do. And so that process was really short. So all that thinking, all that learning, everything took, 8.5 years.
Wow.
But then once we decided, it was like 3 months to make the decision and then to get scheduled for surgeries.
And that was because you were spending all that time researching and learning and preparing.
Right.
I always say you're either in the trial or you're preparing for the trial. So you can actively prepare for it, or you can just passively be prepared. But you were taking an active role in that, like, okay, this might happen, so I'm going to be ready. And that's what made the decision easy when you were there, because boom, you knew what to do.
Yeah.
And so let me ask you this, was the thing that showed up on the mammogram, was that cancerous or anything, or did they ever say? No, it just was enough to wake you up. Yeah, gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
And I think that was a moment I needed to listen to that one.
Yeah, I hear you.
If that didn't happen, I don't know if I would have gone on the road I went on at this point.
Right.
So
your choice was to?
Yeah. So I had a couple different options, but I opted for something that's a little unique and not as common yet. I think it will get there. But I did a lot of my own research and found out that if you remove your fallopian tubes but keep your ovaries, then you keep your hormones. And there's some side effects with getting your ovaries removed too early.
Yes.
And I would have been really prone to them, in addition to the fact that my grandparents and my mom all already had some of those things happening on their own. So like early onset dementia, cardiovascular issues, different things like that. So, and osteoporosis is a huge one. And both my grandmothers and my mom had osteoporosis or the pre-osteo. So I felt like at my mid-30s, it would be difficult to live a long, healthy life with good bones.
Right.
So I decided to remove my fallopian tubes, and that was surgery number 1. And it was all arthroscopic, so it was really easy. And so then I went back a couple months later and started my next step. So I opted for a double mastectomy, but I did a step prior to that in order to keep my nipples, which is
I've heard of that.
An interesting option that I didn't realize was an option. So because I was already semi-large chested, I didn't have a good chance of keeping them on my own. So I had to have a surgery prior to the actual mastectomy where they went in and basically like cut the nerves under the skin behind the nipple and gave that nipple a new blood flow through the top of the skin layer so that it would survive a mastectomy, because if you were to do all that in one step, they don't make it.
Wow. Yeah. It's amazing. They can do this. It's amazing.
I know. But that was something that I didn't know about. So that was one of those things in that initial consultation where they shared that with me. And I was like, okay, I don't have to, not have them or have another surgery. Some women create nipples through a surgical process and tattooing. And I just wasn't sure I was going to want to do that. So to be able to keep them was really significant for me.
Right. Wow.
Yeah.
It's just
So that
amazing.
was surgery 2.
Wow. Okay. Surgery 2.
This is not the path all women will go on.
And
This is
again,
my
everybody,
path.
you can go on her website. I looked at some of your posts. Like she writes a
Yeah.
lot of very, very good detail and, really well about her experience, what it was like going through all of this. So go to
Right.
nohappyaccidents.com and
Yeah.
read about it. Okay. So
Yeah.
surgery number 2. So then,
Yeah. So then I had to heal from that, and they did a little bit of like enhancing. So they removed some excess tissue that was going to have to come out anyway, and kind of tightened up the skin so that it would be ready for the mastectomy. So then that was in June, and then fast forward to August 3rd of last summer, and I went in positive. I've been positive through this whole thing. But that day felt a little different. And looking back, I think it was just a precursor for what ended up happening. But my mastectomy went off without a hitch. I woke up, it's like a 4-hour surgery. It was both sides were removed. I had a surgical team of a surgical breast oncologist, my plastic surgeon, and a whole slew of interns. So a lot of people in the room.
wow, really?
And because I was doing this preventatively due to the BRCA gene, there was a lot of med students in the room to learn because I did it at a learning hospital downtown Chicago. So I felt, they always ask, do you mind? And of course not. Like I want people to learn from this. And if they have an experience that can help other women, bring it on,
Yeah, right. Good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that.
So I woke up and you just sleep. I had to stay overnight at the hospital, and then I was released the next morning. And I had what I thought was a normal recovery. Everything I had read about and been prepared for was what I was experiencing. But I did end up with a pretty significant infection about a week and a half later, and ended up back in the ER for emergency surgery.
Oh, gosh. Scary. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. So emergency surgery again, and then you were able to obviously pull through that, and then more healing time. And
Yeah. So
how long is the healing process after a double mastectomy? How long was it for you?
Mine was extended because of the secondary emergency surgery. But I mean, once the reconstruction happens, because that's what I had the mastectomy with reconstruction, and my skin had gotten infected in some way. And I had been seeing my doctor, so it wasn't like they were ignoring a problem. But what happened was this infection like exploded from the one day I saw my doctor on a Thursday. And then by the next day, it was, a really, really profound situation. So I end up having to have my reconstruction, like my expander implants removed. And then the skin that was infected had to be removed. So I had a long recovery with that because I stayed in the hospital about 5 days. They had to make sure that all the infection was gone. And my doctor was amazing. He was taking precautions, but he didn't want me to lose too much tissue because then it would make the end version of myself harder to get to. So he was walking a really fine line, which at this point, looking back, I really respect and understand and have total trust in that process. Yeah. So I ended up having home health care nurses, and then my kids started school a week later, and I just had to pick up and keep going. So
well, that's it. Like you're a mom still, and that's important.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you that. So, okay, so your kids were what, 5, 9, and 10 when you were doing this, right? So was this just a year ago then?
Yeah, it was just a year ago.
Just a year ago. Wow. Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so how did you, and what do you recommend for others who might be going through this to talk with their children about this? Like, how do you explain this to kids? Like, what's your advice on that?
So,
because they're little, they weren't 18 like you were, and you could understand better, but still, yeah.
So I started with their pediatrician, and I said, hey, this is what's going on with me. Do you have any recommendations or resources I can use as a parent to explain this to my children? And I was told no. And so then I started looking around, and sure enough, there's nothing out there for how to talk to your kids about this specific situation. So there's a lot out there for like breast cancer, but I wasn't sick. So that was, I couldn't use those resources. They weren't really the same, but I was able to use them in the sense that I could explain with empathy, mommy's doing this so that this potentially doesn't happen. And that was really a good way for them to understand. Now, my oldest daughter is very connected. She really gets things. You don't have to say things to her, and she just understands. So I was really able to talk to her. And she had a lot of questions and worries and fears. And I just answered them as honestly as I could without trying to scare her. And just really talk to them openly. Now, there's a difference between telling my 10-year-old what's going on and my 5-year-old what's going on. So with her, I just kind of kept things really generic and general, and said things like, when I get out of the hospital, I need hugs, but just around my neck, trying to make sure that the things she would normally want to do with me, we could still do, but in different ways. So like when you have siblings and you're breastfeeding, a new baby, maybe we'll have the other one with you, sitting next to you reading. So instead of like being interactive and playing, we would sit side by side and color or read and things like that. So that helped her. And my son had a really good friend whose mother was battling breast cancer at the same time. And her mastectomy and mine were a day apart.
Oh my goodness.
So we were really able, her and I had a wonderful relationship of healing through this whole process. But my son then felt really connected to her son because of us kind of going through similar journeys. So
what a blessing. He had a buddy. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I love that you were so specific. And I think that's a great tip for everybody out there listening. When you talk to kids about this or anything that's hard like this, any kind of illness or mental illness or whatever it might be, like you're saying, you made a couple of points, being able to do it in terms that they can understand, age appropriate for their age and stage, and specific. Mostly kids, like husbands and men sometimes, just want to know what to do, right? So if we can just be specific and break it down and tell them, you can still hug me, but do it this way, or, we can do this together, but we might not be able to do that. We can do this, or, I just really think that's a great tip for everybody, for how to speak to kids about pretty much anything that's really difficult.
That's true.
Yeah. So thank you for that.
Sure.
So you got through all of this, and it was this major process. How are you guys doing today, and how are you feeling, and how do you feel about everything that you chose to do and went through?
So I'll just quickly summarize the rest of the procedures I ended up with. So,
okay. There's more. I'm sorry. I'm just like,
no, it's fine.
Away. Yeah.
But I think it helps us get to where I'm at today. So I ended up having my expanders removed, and I had to wait to heal all the way before I could have expanders put back in. So that's the step of reconstruction. Okay. So I really had a longer process.
Because of the infection, you had to.
Because of the infection, yeah.
Because ideally it would have just all happened at once, and then you wouldn't have had to have that. Okay. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And an infection like that is in a normal situation. So,
right.
Just it
so
happened
for everybody
to
out
me.
there, it's not normal, but it can happen.
Yeah,
okay.
It can happen.
That's right.
So I ended up having an expansion process where they put in an expander that they can fill with saline each time you go back to your doctor's office. And the first time that we did it, my husband and I laughed our butts off because I'm sitting in the chair and you lose all, humility in this process.
Yeah. Right.
So you're sitting
like
there
having a baby, somebody just walking in or whatever. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So everything's hanging out and the doctor comes up with this huge needle and, full of saline. And the needle's like this long. Okay.
Oh my gosh.
And he comes right up, he makes a mark. And what's interesting is the expander itself has a little magnet inside of it.
Oh.
So he can identify where the port is. Oh. And then they go right up to you and they go,
oh my gosh.
They jab this in. You don't feel it because, again, there's no nerve endings there anymore.
Right. So
it's not painful. Just kind of like, okay.
Unusual. That's not a normal thing to happen. Okay.
They injected, I forget now. I should have written it down. I probably wrote about it. But a certain amount of cc's of saline in on each side. And you can watch the skin go like as they're filling it up. It grows right in front of your eyes.
Oh my gosh.
And My husband
That's
and
like
I were
what most women just want to have so they can just decide on a daily basis
yeah.
how
So
things
the
look.
running joke was Punky Brewster, if you remember that
Yeah,
show at all.
yeah.
We must increase our
Totally. I totally remember that. Oh, that's so
for all you
funny.
out there.
That's right. That's
There's
right.
a lot of laughter that can come through these processes and
Yeah.
joy and little
Yeah.
moments that just let you know it's a-okay, everything's fine. Even if it doesn't feel fine, you'll get there.
Yes.
So
I love that.
that process took some time. So expansion takes a couple months, and then I was able to have reconstruction where they remove those and put in your official silicone implants. If that's the type you choose, you can also have saline. It just depends on choice.
Gotcha.
And they stitch everything back up, and you heal for a couple days. And all that, and then just kind of take your time getting back on your feet. And like I had to stop exercising for a while, and
Couldn't
things
lift
like
things, I'm guessing, for a while.
yeah. So they say like
Yeah.
a jug of milk,
Okay.
like
Yeah.
heavier than that for a week. But
Oh,
they really
okay.
want you getting up and moving and using your muscles and everything because the implant is actually, I don't know how to show this, but if your body's here and your air is over there.
Mm-hmm.
Implant is put in underneath the muscle layer.
Okay.
So the muscle then is what's stretched out across like your chest wall.
Right.
So that's just something that I think surprises people to know
Yeah.
that
You don't think of that.
your skin, the muscle layer, and then the implant.
Okay. So that's why it has to be prepared in that way so that it can stretch and be whatever size you need. Yeah. Wow. What an experience.
So today,
Yes.
I'm months out of that reconstruction surgery, and I'm doing great. I feel good. They, do some nice things. Depending on your surgeon, I had some fat grafting done to like smooth out the lines from like my chest wall to where the implant is to make it look more natural, and things like that. So, it's been a process, and they can do things to fix little things called revision surgeries where they might come and like smooth out a scar here or there, which I probably will have one area where they do that too in the fall. But other than that, things have worked out for me. It just took longer to get there.
Yes.
But that's okay. I've learned through this. This is just a bit of advice for all moms in any situation, not necessarily this, is that time is such a huge piece of decision making and not to rush making big decisions. At the time I had the infection, all I could think about was, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be done by New Year's Eve. And because my birthday is New Year's Eve, and I just felt like my original timeline, I was supposed to be done by my birthday. And then I was going to have I wanted to have a huge birthday celebration, just to kind of cap off the year and start 2017 off right.
Right. Yeah.
In the moment I was like, oh, that's not going to happen. And I wanted to rush through it. I wanted to rush my body to heal. I wanted to rush, the next step. And I couldn't. And to not have control over that and just let it be was the best lesson I needed in life in general. So
that is such great advice. I mean, and even just your family planning and the size of family that you dreamed of and thought you'd have, and then you're not. And I mean, this is just something, like you say, that everybody listening, hopefully you're listening up to this good advice, that we all experience that, things don't work out the way we want. You didn't expect that this was how you're going to, how your life was going to go at this phase of your life. You didn't even know about genetic testing all those years ago. I'm sure they didn't even have it back then. So, that's great advice. We do need to have patience through the things that life gives us, and have that faith, that it will work out and according to the timeline that it's supposed to work out. And yeah, you, especially when it comes to healing, and that goes for emotional healing or any kind of healing, you can't rush it, and you can't put a time on it. Even if we want
and I'm still healing emotionally.
Of course.
I have a hard time looking down and seeing my scars and seeing my body in a different way. And, and it's just difficult. It's on the outside, everything looks great, and, people have no idea. And that's okay. But on my own, I struggle with, how things look and, just because it's different. It's not the body I had. So,
of course.
yeah.
And do you feel how do you feel emotionally, like peace of mind wise from what you've done? Does it help that way to feel like, I know I'm not going to get breast cancer?
Yeah. It was an immediate feeling of when I woke up in the hospital after the double mastectomy a year ago. It was just an instant relief of pressure, of emotional baggage, of fear, of worry. So yeah, it has helped with that. And there's days where I'm like, oh, if I hadn't have done that, then, X, Y, or Z would be different. But then I had a friend, she's like, yeah, but you have a whole life to do X, Y, and Z.
That's right.
It's all in front of you, and it might not be if you didn't do this.
That's right.
Like, yeah, okay.
That's
you
right.
got it.
That's important. That's important to remember.
Okay.
Good advice. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, I am so grateful for you sharing your personal experience and all the things you've learned along the way. Before we wrap up, like what would you say? If there's one thing you want to say to everybody listening, what's your advice for those who might be considering, checking into the BRCA gene mutation, or who might be already there and deciding what to do, or whatever, anything that you think that might be helpful to our listeners?
So my number one thing I tell people is it's your choice. It's your journey. It's your path. And what worked for me is not going to work for everybody else. And what worked for somebody else wasn't going to work out for me. So just keep that in mind. I think sometimes we compare and we think, oh, if I do this like this person, then I'll have the same outcome. But chances are you won't, because your body is yours and it's its own being. So just keep that in mind. Also take the time to learn about it and don't rush the big choices unless there's a significant scare that you really need to jump on, because there's a lot of resources to find. There's a lot of communities online. Twitter has been awesome to connect with people around the world that, are also going through these same things. So, I have friends that I've found in Ireland and in different parts of the country that are all going through this, and we all have similar stories. Even connecting through Instagram, finding people, and then, connecting, like sharing resources and sharing tips. And, we're breast buddies. It sounds silly, but, to go through it together and have a sisterhood and has really been great. So I would say find some people to follow or resources online, or
and connect with you. That's right.
Connect with me. I can give you information, or just be a resource, or just somebody, a shoulder, a listener.
So, and again, on Twitter or on Instagram, no, not Instagram, Twitter and, through 30 seconds, you can find her at Kim, Kusiciel.
Right.
Or Facebook page or Instagram, you can find her at No Happy Accidents. And on Instagram, it's No Happy Accidents _Kim.
Yeah.
And of course, your website, nohappyaccidents.com.
Right. You got it.
Okay, great. We got it all. Thank you again, Kim. And gosh, I just
Thanks
wish
for having me.
I wish you and your family the best with your continued healing and everything. I hope to check in and things just keep getting better from here. And I know you're doing a lot of great work trying to teach people and educate people and hopefully, provide some of those resources that were lacking when you were going through it. So,
well, and that's what I'm starting to work on is some, something for families for explaining this to kids, because it is quite a lot.
And that's great. With your background, that's like a perfect little project for you. So
thanks.
Let us know when that's done so we can share
Thanks.
it.
All right.
Okay. And for everybody else, thank you so much for being here with us on Motherhood Radio. I hope you continue to grow through your motherhood experience this week, and we will hopefully see you back next time. And until then, have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.